Москва – мегаполис с богатой историей и стремительным ритмом современной жизни. С каждым годом тема сохранения культурного наследия становится все более значимой. Город активно развивается, но при этом все больше внимания уделяется сохранению важных исторических зданий. Одно из современных и прогрессивных направлений в работе с памятниками – переосмысление, когда они наделяются новыми функциями, наполняются новыми смыслами, включаются в социально-экономическую деятельность и адаптируются к стандартам современного мира, диктуя новые вопросы и вызовы. Как адаптировать исторические объекты к жизни современного города? Какие функции исторических зданий наиболее востребованы? Какие перспективы видят собственники исторических зданий? Какие задачи ставит перед собой город сегодня? Борьба за наследие, новые смыслы и перспективы.
The fifth Youth Forum Heritage. So, dear friends, thank you very much for your attention, and now we are happy to declare the beginning of our plenary session, Fight for Heritage, New Essences and Prospects. I'm happy to introduce to you our key panelists, and I hope that, dear friends, you will give them a good round of applause. Nikita Anisimov, rector of the High School of Economics. He cannot be present here in person, but we would receive a video from him. Alexei Yemelyanov, head of the Cultural Heritage Department of Moscow City, please proceed to the stage. Olga Derkunova, Deputy President Chairman of the Board of VTB Bank. Anton Finaganov, Deputy General Director of Dom RF Foundation. I'm also happy to introduce to you the moderator Sergei Georgievsky, co-founder of the Center Group of Companies and the chair of the Expert Council. So I declare the session Fight for Heritage, New Essences and Prospects open. Good morning, dear friends. We are going to discuss heritage, new prospects, new essences. Heritage, both tangible and intangible, have a new understanding now in the context of urban development and the changes in the quality of urban environment, identity that defines our belonging to this or that district, city, area that makes us Muscovites or citizens of this or that city or town and part of its intangible culture. And this will be discussed by us together with our experts, and Anton Finaganov will join us online, and we will start with the address of the rector of High School of Economics, Nikita Anisimov. I'm happy to welcome you, dear participants of the Youth Forum Heritage. You are in for 2 really rich days with meetings of dozens of experts who are leading Russian and international experts in architecture, renovation, urban planning, media, and representatives of High School of Economics are among them. We have been developing professionals in heritage preservation for many years. We have carried out research and applied studies, and I would like to congratulate the organizers with the 5th anniversary of the forum. I'm confident that the interest in it will grow, and we also celebrate the 30th anniversary of High School of Economics. So this forum is really of signpost meaning to us in our Jubilee year. So I would like to wish you all the best, good luck, and I am sure that the proposals set forward by the specialists, by the students, will be really of high importance, and projects on restoring and reintegrating the urban space are also be shown and maintained at the forum. Dear participants, you have done a lot of work, and I'm sure that in these months you have come up with a lot of unconventional solutions, and I'm sure and I hope that they will lay a good foundation for our culture heritage preservation. And I'm sure that your meetings with the experts will deepen your interest further on. I would like to wish you all highly productive work, and I'm happy to welcome you, dear participants of the Youth Forum Heritage. So fighting for heritage is usually fighting with indifference, that is constant dialogue with the city, and an attempt to find new locations and the place for heritage in the city environment. And I would like to give the floor to Alexei Yemelyanov, head of the Department of Cultural Heritage of the Moscow City, who daily meets the attitude to heritage sites and their integration in the urban environment. Good morning. Good morning, dear friends. To tell the truth, when I learned the topic of our plenary session at this Jubilee 5th Youth Forum, Heritage, I was saddened. Fighting for heritage. I started thinking who we're fighting with. In Moscow, there are around 700 sites that is work in progress, 200 sites where the restoration work is in its final stage, and next year it will be 2,000 cultural sites that have been covered in the recent 11 years, and it is the first day of winter today. So I started thinking what fight we were going to talk about. But when I looked deeper into it, I understood that it is truly fighting for heritage, and first and foremost, that is fighting our indifference. Because no matter how much we renovate, restore, talk about figures, sites, locations, but if we are indifferent, we Muscovites are indifferent to it, and for example, we get up in the morning, we leave home for work, and we don't care. For example, why our district is Tekstilshiki, and next to us is Kuzminki, and next to us is Ryazansky, and inside it there is the toponym Karacharova, and when we get to work, we don't care about the name of the street that our office is located in, and why all the buildings and facilities in these streets are the same to us, though they are truly very interesting and various. And no matter how much the city invests and restores, if there are more and more indifferent people, then all our work and all our training, all our development, all our figures and stories will just be in vain. So that is truly fighting for heritage and fighting our indifference. And it is in this fight that we are moving in one single front line, dear friends. So what did we start with? We all understand that it all starts with the childhood. And 4 years ago, we, the Department of Cultural Heritage of Moscow, arranged a competition of children's pictures, heritage of my district. We were really worried, on the one hand, as parents and elder brothers or sisters, because we understood that a lot of young Muscovites were really keen on different devices, gadgets, games, and we were thinking something like, would anyone draw anything but for the Bolshoi Theater in the Red Square? And we hoped to receive at least 50 drawings, and we would report on this contest, and that is it. And we received 500 drawings in the first contest and 3,500 on the fourth contest. The interest shown was really huge, and it was striking, because who we addressed at, there were preschool and young school children. So the people in whose hands there will be the future of Moscow and our country in 15-20 years. And these people can draw, can paint, and when you approach their work of art, they can tell you a whole story. Can you imagine how nice that is? For example, a girl of 8 drew a cathedral in Butovo, and I asked her why, and she said that is because I go there from my birth. So somebody drew parks, others centers, and one boy drew a metro station that was launched several years ago, and for him that is the heritage of his district, and he cherishes this metro station. So, dear friends, I really call on you to take part in this 5th Jubilee contest of children's drawings and paintings. So we would be looking forward to receiving the works of your younger siblings. Please join us. And we really value this contest. And it is the 4th year running that we have received a lot of really brilliant paintings, and apart from our expo of Moscow Boulevard and our trips to, for example, Minsk, where we took a very interesting idea together with our Department of Transport, that is like metro, tunnels, and mines. And if you go to Vidianhai and Kitai-Gorod, you will see that the sketches of 2 participants of the contest were used for these ventilation tunnels in these locations. And we are now moving forward, and school children from 8 to 18 are our next target group, and it is really critical for us to know whose hands will work on cultural heritage sites. And we arranged 2 schools, a school of young renovator and school of young archaeologist. So I had a look at the figures, and on the one hand we are really proud of them, because 50 children since 2019 have been attending these schools, and they would like to become restorers. And maybe someone feeling the scale of our metropolis would say that 50 people is nothing, but as compared to 2018, that is 50 times higher. And we are not willing to get some high figures and reports. What is really crucial for us is that among children, 50 people see themselves in the restoration field in their future. Another project of ours that is restoration curatorium, and here we work with students of colleges. So that is young boys and girls who have joined restoration departments. So we arranged their work together with the current professionals that work in Moscow today.
And I'm glad to say that about 300 students, I'd like to stress once more, it's not necessarily something super mandatory. These are the young people who want to be involved. Around 300 students are working there. And obviously, dear friends, our favorite and our most large-scale educational program, which is the Youth Forum Heritage. I'm glad to remind you that 5 years ago, when we organized this forum, it was a quiet Moscow local event. We took a premise which was in a seriously damaged situation and condition, and we addressed a number of universities of Moscow to make an interdisciplinary team to work with this subject. And we thought that this project will develop nice and slowly in a smooth manner. We saw the interest of the regions. The next year, in the second forum, we had regional program, and we realized that people are interested and this educational cycle is needed. That's how the educational program appeared. The next year, speakers, professionals who are involved in the educational program turned to us with a proposition to make a number of roundtables in order to tell about the experience of restoration and adjustment of the monuments, not only in Moscow, but around Russia. And this is how the business program appeared. And the next phase was the previous year and this year. We realized that very thorough work educational program, regional program, there should be some kind of fest. And the festival day, is one of the features of the new platform. It will be held in Khadinskaya Street number 2 on the 3rd of December on Saturday, and we invite you there. We really tried hard to make it an interesting and festive event. So let's celebrate it in Khadinskaya Street, house number 2, the 3rd day of winter. And dear friends, our life is going on, and not always it's about youth. We had the 22nd event this year, over 350 events, 6,500 participants, and apart from the scholars and parents, we made special focus on Moscow Long Living program, and we presuppose that our grandfathers and grandmothers would just attend our events and just have a good time. But it turned out to be that many participants of this program were dreaming to make excursions. And within the framework of these days of cultural heritage, we have a special segment of the program where these people, senior people, work making excursions. And it was a really big surprise for us. It was really amazing that in different people are fewer and fewer in the city. And it's really important for me that every year we make special writing tests with questions and answers. And I'm glad that one of the platforms which we used for this dictation work this year, that was the High School of Economy, in 2022, over 115,000 participants were there. I'm afraid to make a mistake now, but it's around 10 times higher than when it was for the first time. Then there were our volunteers, the exhibition on import substitution, which we held for the first time, and the digits, the numbers, which I started with over 700 of monuments are still under our restoration, and over 200 have been restored. It's really fighting for our heritage, is fighting our indifference. And the more people are indifferent towards the culture and architecture of our city, the easier will be the work for our department, and our life will shine even brighter. I'm convinced. Thank you very much for your attention, and I will be glad to answer your questions. Thank you very much. We'll have an opportunity for discussion, and now, if we have such a technical opportunity from Moscow, we would like to move from Moscow to the federal level, to the level of the whole Russia, and we have Anton Vladimirovich Finagenov. Dom RF, Anton, can you hear us? We can hear you. I can hear you perfectly as well. Wonderful. Domaref is establishing standards of new level of life all over the country and introducing it in all practices and in all levels, starting from quartier level to master planning, the project center of Domaref is strengthening these master plans. What is the attention which you pay to the historical and cultural heritage? To what extent the material objects of these heritage are part of work and strategic approach to developing the cities and the blocks and the regions and the agglomerations? Yes, good day to you, colleagues. That's a really relevant topic. The main goal of Domaref is developing the real estate, the dwelling housing. And we also develop the towns and the territories, and the significant part of the developed projects are related to the development of the heritage and historical parts of the cities. If the industrial cities more often were planned in the Soviet times, there was some kind of anchor investor who helps to develop the city together with in a public-private partnership. But in the old towns, such investors are very often absent. And Vnysh-Ekonombank, which is Web RF today, we are trying to launch complex projects of transformation of the cities. Why they're complicated? Looking for balance on one hand in preserving cultural heritage in these historical towns, which were brought to quite a sad condition in the last 100 years, and significant investments are required to make this building operable and to fulfill some sort of basic technical functions. On the other hand, the goal is to find some sort of investment interest to participate in the development of these territories, because it's obvious that exclusively using budget money, it is impossible to bring back to life such volume of monuments. And looking for motivation, it has always been a very complicated project story. If I may, I would like to show a few slides to give examples of 2 our projects in Ivanovo and in Tver. I would have an opportunity to give more details about the problems of it and the tools which we are using in order to solve these issues. Do we have such an opportunity, colleagues? A technical possibility. All right then. Before the slides are shown, I will just like that. Let's move to Ivanovo, theoretically, which is not far away from Moscow, but the situation is very different. On one hand, we see a town with a big cultural heritage, because Ivanovo, Voznesensk are two old towns. They historically were one of the industrial locations of Russia in the Tsar times. It has had a textile production, and it was one of the major towns and cities. Moreover, in the 20s and the 30s, there was a new dawn for them, for the city, because Soviet Russia, it was positioned as a proletarian capital of a new lifestyle, which thank you for the slides. This new proletarian capital had to demonstrate the quality of life of working people, for whose benefit, by the way, the revolution was held in the 1970s. That's why Ivanovo is also one of the centers of the new architectural tendencies. They were built in the 20s and in the 30s, and one of the central monuments is the territory of Ivanovskaya manufacture, which is a typical example of industrial development in the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century, with more contemporary Soviet periods of construction. Unfortunately, the current condition of this area is quite sad. Some of these buildings try to be used for industrial purposes. Some of them are used as commercial centers of low quality, and it does not allow to use this complex in a regular, normal way. So we were trying to find a concept of transformation for the project, and it's important to say that such projects in the regions, Ivanovo and something like that, is that contrary to Moscow and St. Petersburg and a number of other major cities of the country, there is no such demand for quality real estate. It's not the cheapest real estate, and restoring cultural heritage is always more expensive than building new constructions. And the demand is quite restricted there. The business centers or hotels also have to meet some high level of expectations, and there is no such demand in the regional centers for them. We cannot simply draw a project for a hotel like 4-star or 5-star hotels, because it will not pay back. That's why maybe one of the major success factors is, first of all, integration of the surrounding territory. It's looking for the neighboring lots which are not that limited as the areas for protection of cultural heritage, and it gives an opportunity to build, among other things, like new buildings, and to have certain profit from this construction, which will be then forwarded for restoration of cultural heritage, and which is also important to send this money to create high-quality, open public spaces, which should be an entrance point, so to say, for the old industrial areas and the central areas around them. Because very often these territories is like an eggshell. These are closed territories. They can be located in the very center, and they are made in the behind the closed door, so to say, or they are made in as a private territory. So this integration is planned to be made for them not to become these dark areas on the map. But obviously it will be a serious load on the investment component of the project. And the next moment is obviously the looking for functions and which require certain demand. And the map is this collective economy which is closely related to the economy which is oriented on tourism and which is very important. It's cooperation with small-scale and medium-scale business. These quality businesses, quality focuses, which are related to, like, for example, the restaurant business, some food markets, the functions which are related to some art activity like galleries and public areas, or the territories which are suitable for some public events, maybe some small business functions like mini typography, printing house, or location for IT business. These are all investors, small-scale and medium-scale investors, which still have to be found, and it's quite complex to do so. It's much easier to work with general actors, the anchor investors, anchor tenants, and the process is going much more actively. But these are basically the problems which we face. This attempt to create a unique project, because it's impossible just to copy-paste it from one town or from one city to another. These are always unique cases, and even in the Moscow environment, it's always different from case to case and from investor to investor and from environment to environment. So this is always individual and integration. The next case, which is similar, is Tver. It's also has some sort of identical territory, some identical history. This is basically the end of the correlation, because after that go the features, and this industrial territory there is not in the very heart of the city. In the very heart of the city, there is some more trade and business, real estate. The next slide will probably show it more distinctively. Here we have the examples when we integrate the surrounding territories, trying to organize the dwellings for new opportunities and restoration of the old ones. Obviously, this is cooperation with the population, because it really is not that easily perceived by the community. They do not trust it that much for restoration of the cultural heritage objects. They think that restoration is the way to call reconstruction in a different manner, and that presupposes that the objects would be demolished and some replicas will be built in their places, and you have to be open always for the community, for the people. And the principal position of the regions is really important. Such regional administrations as Tverskaya region and all over Russia lacks the funding for restoration workers in particular. And if they are ready to use even some small money for creation the social infrastructure, if they're ready to do that, it mainly allows to increase the economy, to make the economy of the projects better, and will attract a private investor, because a private investor will come if he sees some kind of perspective. because very often these projects do not pay back these restoration projects if they are paid exclusively from the budget. And the infrastructural obligations, the other tools which are used at certain rates, especially for construction of the social infrastructure, the engineering infrastructure, the transport one, and even some public areas.
Inside the project. So these are two brightest, I would say, cases that are now at the beginning of their implementation in regional cities and towns not far from Moscow. And these projects do not go as fast as we would like, but naturally, projects of this kind have to be dozens in implementation, in simultaneous implementation. And we believe that some specially targeted federal program can help that would allocate some funds from the federal budget to support these projects. It's clear that private financing should always take place as well as an approach to a high-quality model, and together with the Agency of Strategic Initiatives and with WEB, we are focusing on this now because the government would like to see what tasks so that project is solving and what aims it has. But we believe that using cultural heritage sites as the basis for further social and economic life is the main attraction for young people in cities like those that are around Moscow, which acts as a magnet and takes away all inhabitants of Smolensk, Kaluga, Tula, Yaroslavl, Ivanovo, Tver, and other neighboring cities. So projects like this have to motivate them to stay, because they would show that these cities have better conditions for small business, because the competition is less and chances for faster development are more, and you can be integrated in really interesting clusters, because it's hard to get to art play, for example, district in Moscow. It will be really expensive, and here regions and municipalities are ready to provide the people who are interested in it with the nice conditions and act as a co-financiers, co-funders, and we believe that integration of development and reconstruction and restoration projects for cultural and historical heritage sites is one of the key tasks for the country's spatial development, tourism development, recreation and cultural development. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Mr. Fenaganov, and we have mentioned the role of developmental institutes like banks and other major institutions, and the top concentration of practices, approaches and solutions that Moscow has sure belongs to St. Petersburg. And I would like to give the floor to Olga Dergunova, Deputy President and Chair of the Board of VTB Bank that has these practices. And so I believe that you would talk about the main case of today, Mikhailovsky Dachi. No, I won't. First, I would like to meet our colleagues. My name is Olga Dergunova. I'm a Deputy Chair of VTB, and apart from that, I'm also Director of Higher School of Management of St. Petersburg State University. And St. Petersburg Management School is something that I focused on several years ago, and I would like to tell you why I wanted it. But to begin with, I would like to ask you a question. Please raise your hands, those who study in finance and economics. for me just to understand whether there are these people in the room. Great. So you are not in touch with these subjects. And what about creative areas like urban planning, design? Please raise your hands. Don't be afraid. I'm not taking an exam. Okay. So then I would like to talk about the following and start our discussion and debate with the audience. So cultural heritage site preservation decision is something that several parties take place in. First and foremost, that is the state, and Alexei Alexandrovich has shown us how successfully Moscow has been implementing the public function in growing and developing the cultural environment that we are in Moscow. The second party is naturally the society, that is all of us, citizens and people living in this or that town, city, country, that voice their willingness and wishes about the place we reside in. So that is the dialogue between the society and the state. And there is also a third party, that is a business, because when we start thinking about financing and preserving cultural heritage sites, economic models and viability, maintaining their sites is always the function of money, and the state cannot be the only source of this money to fund these ideas and areas. Naturally, part of funding goes from patrons of art and different charity people. But anyway, part of this joint decision on funding, financing and preserving cultural heritage sites is taken by business. And we, as a VTB bank, do it in several ways, and I would like to tell you something about how we make decisions. We have worded a pretty simple principle for ourselves. When we consider a cultural heritage site, the principle is preserve and develop. Naturally, museum workers and the state sees cultural heritage site preservation as the main goal, but a site is always a site under management. And it doesn't matter that you do not study finance or economics. You, being people who manage your lives, your budget, have to understand how and why this site will exist after you have preserved it. Therefore, this discussion about the target of the cultural heritage site that used to be a church, a cathedral, a museum, or a hotel or stables, you would like to restore it, but how will it function later on? Who would provide for the monetary flow to maintain this site and for the site to have the idea, the essence behind it, so that we as citizens can go there and use it? And when we as a bank make a decision on how we would act with this or that cultural heritage site, with or without the state, we first and foremost ask ourselves the question of the goal of this site. And on the 3rd, like Alexei Alexandrovich has said, you are invited and you will have a session at Zotov Center at Hadinskoye Pole. That is a former bakery that was built in 1931, and that is a typical bakery that was scaled in the number of 14 sites around Russia. And you might ask a question, how come that a bank was the owner, became the owner of the bakery? Well, first, it might have been accidentally, but then when we saw the building that was really beautiful because of its industrial architecture and also because it could become the social development center for creative young people of Moscow, it became obvious that to preserve, to restore and to adapt, most importantly, this site to the modern world became the main goal for its development. And I'm really happy that the Department of Cultural Development of Moscow supported and backed up this initiative. At the next session, roundtable, the director and our employee, Daria Filipova, will give you all the detail about this site. But the most important thing is that we would not like to make it a static museum, classical museum that we are used to. We would like to make it an open public space, first and foremost for creative young people that would be able to showcase their works there and receive feedback beyond the educational institutions that they study at. And that is one of the ways of decision making. You get a site, you become its owner, you make a decision on its development, and you understand that you have to calculate the financial model of its further life. And in that sense, the support of the bank of this highly important and demanded site becomes part of our strategy of sustainable development. And in this case, sustainable development, a sustainable model, is not a play on word, but a unified approach that we are applying. Another example that Sergei started with, that is our interaction with the High School of Management of St. Petersburg University. And in 2006, when a decision was made on the development of a business school in the Russian Federation, President Putin made a decision that there had to be a business school in St. Petersburg. And we started considering where it should be. In 2006, when we were building an international level campus, and we were choosing between Strelna, Konstantin Palace, and Peterhof. I believe that you can understand the beauty of this location, and the decision was made to come up with a new campus of this business school on the basis of almost ruined cultural heritage site of the federal importance, that is Mikhailov's duchy, that were the ruins of the great knight Mikhail, who was son to Nicholas I. There were stables, palaces, and it was really all devastated. And what is the principle of integrating the interests of the state that has a task to develop an international level campus for the local school in St. Petersburg? Then business, we as the members of the Patrons Council and the high school itself, and it was really hard to adapt a cultural heritage site for modern life, because you cannot violate the level and the number of stores, you cannot violate the landscape, and it is hard to explain it with some standard cost estimates for building and development. And for you, when you come up with your projects today, even if you do not meet the financial and economic analysis and financial models, when you are devising your concept of what you would like to see, you would have to face it, because any idea, any conceptual idea has financing as its backdrop. And when we were looking at all these ruins and we're discussing it with the Architectural Bureau of Nikita Lenin, Studio 44. Colleagues understood that optimizing and standardizing costs alongside some standard conventional federal cost estimates would not enable us to come up with an international level campus preserving all the heritage. And the state makes a decision basing on the dialogue and financial model and target setting with St. Petersburg State University on how the business school should function. That implied some special costs and prices, and the state would support and develop it for the further 20 years beyond the conventional management model. And believe me, it is extremely difficult for a state that has to be standard, transparent, predictable, and to a certain extent the same for all sites under management. It is very hard to motivate, to understand it, why a federal level important site should have some unconventional costs and prices. And when you, as creative people, go to any cultural heritage site with your ideas on how to restore it, you will also face this dilemma to go the out-of-the-box conventional way, or to come up with a new logic, a new financial model that would support unconventional decisions. And the High School of Management was really lucky in this case because the unconventional decision was made with the best restorers, architects, with really successful implementation of this school, business school, on the basis of St. Petersburg University, and it resulted in the fact that now it is the best campus in the Russian Federation, and I am happy to invite you there, because on the basis of those ruins, now we have a top-notch complex with modern education environment, with all the necessary IT, and students that are in St. Petersburg can perceive a very good message from that. They can wear the cultural code of modern respect, continuity of cultures, and further development of the environment and synergy between preserving a site and developing it. And we do not stop at the architecture of the 19th century. We do not want to stay within the conventional frames, both architecturally and logically and developmentally. The site has gone further. That is the site of the 21st century. Therefore, the students, when they find themselves in that environment, and I'm sure that when you study at a High School of Economics with similar sites in Moscow, you perceive the environment that you are in as something that just goes without saying. And that is what we are striving for when we preserve and develop a site. Because you can strike this balance between history and modern times. You respect it all and you can move it further on. And finishing my word, and I would suggest opening the Q&A session, I believe that preserving sites is of utmost importance, but it cannot be done just as such, because, for example, the state or some private investor can fund it, but the site will still not live if it does not have the sense, because we always have to strike the balance between economics, finance, essences, cultural code, and willingness to develop together with your country onwards. For you, as a youth forum that has this background of the education that you are now receiving, I would like to give you a piece of advice. When you start approaching cultural heritage site, take a finance or economist guy with you to calculate the financial model of further development of this site. Thank you very much, and now let's have a Q&A session, and I would like to ask our distinguished key panelists to answer maybe a populist question, but still, is there anything that prevails in the functions or something that we add to the cultural heritage site? And if you have questions in the audience, please, you can use the mic to ask them. And Anton is online, connected with us as well, and our colleagues are here. So what prevails in what historical buildings can be filled with? Is it museum condition, or public space, or educational functions, or commercial functions? So what do you think these buildings are more suitable for? Thank you for this very good question. And I would say, like question, like answer. Every cultural heritage site is a monument because it is original and unique. And for any cultural heritage site, as we now know, the prevailing majority of those present here are architects, future architects, urban planners. So there is always an idea in the center of it all. And this idea and these guys, that is something that the funding will develop on.
You know, as many cultural heritage objects, these many ideas we do have, sometimes it becomes the point of attraction, the gravity point. Some things like Narkamfin House or the Northern River station, or as we had this tram stop in Studentski Lane, it preserves its historical function, and some of them do change their function, like a depot in Listnaya Street, and dozens of objects which, during restoration and obvious preservation of the object, it becomes suitable for different functions and receive their new life, as it happens in St. Petersburg and a famous stable. That's why the preservation or substitution of a historical function, we have to understand whether it will be a museum or just a masterpiece, or it can become a point of attraction like the Northern River station. It all depends on your efforts, your ideas, and our joint work. Thank you. An example of Mikhailovskaya dacha and reconstruction of the subject of cultural heritage is really easy to answer it, because every educational entity, particularly the university which is located in this environment, is also an attraction point for the residents of these areas, and this is a trigger for interest for the students. That's a trigger of interest to the culture of the place where they are. And it has been absolutely correctly said that people have to know the toponymy of the territory. Why Mikhailovskaya dacha? Who is this Mikhail I? Where to ask? Here's the Russian Museum and the Hermitage. The very environment, the very location, the way the campus is made. We tried to discuss it after with our Hermitage colleagues, and after Biennale we transferred the Sakurov sculpture to the business school. We installed them in the hall, and the students were coming and asking, what is that? We made a QR code with description that it's Sakurov, is his filmography, and the Biennale in Venice. And then we took another thought and made Rembrandt on the other side for the Hermitage, and the number of people who went to Hermitage multiplied twice as much. So since that moment, when I meet the students in St. Petersburg, though I am a Muscovite, I ask them, dear students, who of you visited Hermitage, the Hermitage? Please raise your hands. If they are not from St. Petersburg, that's one or two hands. And in the fourth year of education, I ask the same question. And this difference between the number of those who were in the beginning and in the end, then why do we need it? Because the environment which you develop has an extra task, a sustainable perception of a leader, of a manager, the whole perception of culture as a part of management which they carry with them. That's why going to the Hermitage, to the Tretyakov gallery, that's an extra thing which adds to the place where you learn how you integrate this cultural message, whether these are the basic or non-basic or educational programs, like places which students visit, is also really important, and it does motivate people to develop and grow intellectually further on, and I hope that we will keep doing it all. This defines our understanding, our perception. Maybe somebody has a question to our speakers. Bear in mind how many urban experts raised their hands. Maybe you wanted some kind of discussion about the heritage of the city and how it influences our identity and the development of our cities. You can feel free to take the mic in the center of the audience and ask a question. I can ask a question. Please raise your hands who were in the Hermitage. That's the cultural environment and the Tretyakov gallery. Great. Bravo. The president of Открытый мир, Evgeny. In the dawn of Europe, the book, it was said that when the Franks destroyed the contemporary empire, the contemporary European civilization will be demolished by the Arab people and the inhabitants of the African continent. What do you think if the format of Moscow city will expand to the Moscow ring road? Will there be some sort of apocalypse, or as the end not only of cultural and architectural period, but maybe some historical period of the existence of Moscow, the way we know it and we love it, and so on? Thank you. Thank you very much for a question. I'd like to say that our beloved city of Moscow is the city which has constantly been developing. Dear friends, Moscow of the 17th century is not similar to Moscow of the 18th century, and the Moscow of the 19th century does not look alike the Moscow of the 20th century, and Moscow of the 40s of the 20th century does not is not similar to the previous things. We can go along every historical street, like Moroseyko, for example. Next to the Polytechnical Museum, we will see, to the left of it, we see the building of Птицу Союз, constructivism, and then will be the mansion of Razumovsky, and then will be the temple of the 18th century, and later on there will be Stretinsky hotels, guest house. And in this composition, which on the first sight might look surprising or even arrogant, this is the very beauty of this city. That's why Moscow city is the project of the previous day and the day before that. You can imagine how the house, the Stretinsky house in Moroseyko, number 5, if I'm not mistaken, also number 7. How does it look like? With a unique temple of the 18th century. That's our historic Moscow. And it's today's historic view of Moroseyko Street. And every street is going like that, along Pyatnitskaya, along Dmitrovka. You can see the balance of the uncompatible, uncomposable things, and this balance is amazing. We can take Povarskaya Street, is full of monuments, but these monuments are in the beginning of the 20th century. And if we take this street in the mid 18th century, that's an absolutely different one, but extremely nice and beautiful Moscow. Now it's all full of monuments and full of mansions, and it's also beautiful in its own manner. That's why I do not see anything horrible for our city, for developing, but it has to develop with the balance of interests of the community, of the government and business. And thank you once more for this wonderful question. I'd like to add that the Arab culture, many people say, it's a connecting culture between the ancient European culture and the medieval culture of Europe. And Europe was waiting for the European twist of history, and we'll see the new inflow of development of the European Union in many countries which lost their connection at that moment with African countries and with many of those who we call migrants today. Let's go on with this discussion. It's really interesting whether we can consider a city an antipode to the cultural heritage and what's basically its threat. The city exists in every cultural, in many cultural capitals of the world, and in St. Petersburg there are replicas of and elements of historical heritage. They were integrated. Maybe somebody wants to support this discussion, who would like to probably give a comment or ask a question about that. Hello, my name is Christina. I'm a student of the second year of the University of President of Moscow. You had three target audience in your presentation: the parents, the youth, and the elderly. And as far as I understand, the whole audience has to do with the cultural heritage, or at least is interested in that. How can we communicate with the target audience which is not involved in restoration, in architecture in general? Are there any methods of influence? Because the heritage of our city is important in any case, and we have to preserve these objects. How can we then walk along our wonderful streets? Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for being that thorough with so following so closely my presentation. Yes, I really focused on children. Indeed, I focused on the elderly, and the gap between them is that we perfectly understand these are either somebody's parents or somebody's children, and this is the most active part of our society, which participates anyhow, brings children to their first events, or accompany the elderly or the active participants of all our social media and excursions, quests and quizzes, and other activities. That's why we do not forget this gap between the students and the elderly in no manner. And you have absolutely correctly pointed out the development of the city, active development of the city. Development of the historical center should be held with bearing in mind the priority of preservation of historical heritage and the value of it. Maybe somebody else has a question? While you're thinking, I'll have a question to Olga Konstantinovna. You referred to a very important aspect of economy, financial modeling. Do you think that every object of cultural heritage can be a self-sustainable one, have its own economy, make money for its own existence, or we can say that there are objects which will be always supported, but from outside, but nevertheless it's our heritage and we have to support it? Of course, there will be objects who have to be supported from outside, but making an attempt and foresee new ways of monetization of the existing things is important, because what we do not know what to do today, the next generation will come up with an idea how to use it properly. We always have to keep trying, but it will not always be successful. We'll have to understand it. That's basically what the companies exist for, and the donations for that, because this donation is about support of objects who do not have direct monetization. That's why this movement of supporters, the supporter, helps the development, and the Observation Council is a controlling body following according to the target points and target indexes. This is a helping hand. It's a situation when I would like to support on those who want to donate for the preservation than more than on those who have the target, the use of target, the ideas of target use of that. Such objects like the Pushkinsky Museum, the Hermitage, or something more modest in small towns or medium-sized towns, not necessarily the capital cities, can become the economy of the whole, can create the economy of the whole town, to attract more interest to this town or city. Maybe it does not generate the full volume of money necessary for its support, but it generates the inflow and has the relative effect over the economy. Yes, obviously, you're right, it does have this influence. That's a very important part of the environment. Maybe somebody else wants to join our discussion, has some comments. It's hard to overestimate the role of heritage in our life. Now the question of preservation of the architectural appearance of the block. The group which bought the many cinemas in Moscow, regardless of showing losses in about 2 billion out of 6 allocated for that, we will not refer to economic part, maybe it's a matter of time. But the question is to Olga Konstantinovna, the money which are allocated by VTB Bank, does VTB perform some kind of supervision over that? Because those cinemas which they have already built, developed, or which are under construction now, yes, so obviously they are contemporary ones. They're made of aluminium and glass, but there is no such connection to the architectural appearance of the block. So basically there is nothing apart from this fusion and modern type of aluminium and glass in the appearance of that. Does VTB play some sort of supervision there, or participate somehow, or no? Unfortunately, I cannot answer that. I'm afraid. I'm just not informed about that. Thank you. I would like to help you. I'm losing something. Our agency was a partner of ADK Group, and let's start from the fact that the program which refers to the cinemas, where did it come from? All these cinemas were primarily degrading. These were locked objects, or the ones who were rented to many tenants chaotically. None of them preserved the function of cinema. We're not speaking about the objects which were used on purpose, but in the planning of the Soviet regions and blocks, the cinema was considered as the center of cultural life. And they are perfectly located in the centers of these blocks. It had its individual appearance, and the artists were creating the the declaration of them. I cannot speak about the economical component because it's not our sphere of responsibility. But speaking about these cinemas, I have to say that in fact the most important thing which happened, instead of losing these objects and substituting them with a high-rise building, they preserved the function of cultural centers. The idea of community centers was invented with the function of demonstration and not only trade functions, and it is being implemented. It's really important. Apart from that, if we consider it as a system of identity and heritage, the group was explaining all these unique posters developed by the best artists and designers of their own times. They restored it, they made the register of it and restored it and returned it. Those unique artifacts of their times which were preserved and conservated, so they remained. And if we speak about the architecture itself, they were all in the same style.
And we can even go deeper here. For its time, these were innovation projects, and only 2 of them were sites that were like cultural heritage sites, and they are preserved, they are restored. All the rest are like typical sites, so they had no artistic value, but at the same time, the approach was really well thought over. Armand de la Vitte, famous architect, spent a lot of her time in Russia analyzing the approach to public spaces and tried to recreate this new Russian style in this series of cinemas. And it is hard for us to imagine that she was inspired by Russian birch trees, but still, if you have a look at the whole project, you will see how the facades and the solutions were manifested. So it is not by barbarian demolition, but it is continuity of ideology, of sites and locations, that is unique design and preserving all the valuable things and author's architecture that world-famous architect has brought to our city. Let us give a warm round of applause to our moderator. It feels like he got prepared to this question. Thank you very much. Do you have any more questions or comments? I can see there are more people willing to say something. Hello, my name is Daria, and I'm a student of South Urals State University. And the question I have is as follows. Moscow has a high level of culture and funding, and that helps to preserve and fund cultural heritage sites. But what should small cities and towns do? If they have a lot of beautiful historical buildings that are really worth of attention and preservation, but how should they raise funds for this preservation? Because if people are not that interested in it, they are just surviving, I would say, in these towns and cities. That is a very good question. Anton, are you here with us? Anton Finnegan. Yes. Hello again. I believe it will be really valuable to go back to your experience, because Dom RF works not only with metropolises but also with medium and small cities and towns. So the question is, how should we act there? How can these cities and towns raise funds to implement projects inter alia that are connected with cultural heritage site preservation? Do you have any practice and prescription, so to say, here? How do you work with medium and small cities and towns as the development institute? First, you need to find yourself the tourist map of Russia. That is work in progress. We understand that the tourism development potential and attracting new residential areas is huge. Only 15 or 20% of medium and small cities and towns, mostly in central Russia and northern Russia, that are now present. So those cities that are now in the tourist turnover account for only 15-20%. mostly if we talk about 300 and 400 kilometer distance area around Moscow, the tourist potential there is the top, because there is a chance for 2 or 3 day trips by your own car, and Moscow agglomerate population that accounts for 20 million people is the most capable of going to these cities. So first you need to find yourself on this tourist map, discover this heritage, and there are special federal plans of Rostourism and Ministry of Economy of the Russian Federation to come up with a list of cities and towns that potentially can be interesting. And we need to think of a list of those infrastructure solutions, including accessibility, transport accessibility, that has to be implemented as the first step. Then a set of functions, service functions that need to unravel around these points of attraction. And then, like I have said, you need to strike a balance between budget funds and private finance. And we understand that for cities that are within 300 and 400 kilometers from large cities like Moscow, St. Petersburg, Kazan, Yekaterinburg, they have a potential of remote jobs, and this is something that started really vastly in COVID pandemic, and it goes on now. In our work, we also try to maximize the budget investment effect in such a way that we don't build some new sites in our programs, but try to adapt cultural heritage sites for the functions that we need. So the combination of all these three sources, and furthermore, when we are talking about a city forming company or enterprise, they are also willing to engage in working on these sites for their development institutions, educational institutions, in their fight for the employees. So these are the areas of activities that we have now. But a lot depends on the activity of the specific municipality or region. If the mayor is unwilling to do anything, and they are satisfied with the budget they have, no master plans, Rostourism or Dom RF would be able to help. Thank you. Thank you, Anton. And I would also add that we have a targeted policy to small towns and cities, and there is an all-Russian contest of small cities and towns and historical residential areas and different sites that get there can win special funding, and there is a special program, and every year the best projects are published, and then we have this implementation. So you can see not only something that was designed, but what was also suggested for restoration in this or that city or town, and also how it was all done. Ministry of Construction of Russia is in charge of this program, and any of you interested would like can see how it is implemented. So we have talked about the fight for heritage, new essences, and the role of heritage. Let us give us a round of applause to our key panelists. And now I would like to declare our session closed. And we are in for a very rich program today. Thank you.